I'm sure you've seen a controversial VAR decision. Think about it. They showed the exact same footage to millions of people, and somehow half of them think it's obviously a penalty, while the other half thinks it's not. It's the same evidence, completely different conclusion. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because you see the same thing whenever people are talking about AI in their company. You might have one person will tell you it's going to completely transform the way we work. Somebody else, though, will tell you it's massively overhyped. And then what you've got are two potentially incredibly intelligent people looking at roughly the same evidence and somehow reaching completely different conclusions. So why is this? Why does this happen? I actually think sometimes intelligence can make the problem worse. And there's a really good example of this in the film Moneyball. So if you've seen Moneyball, you know what I'm about to say. If you haven't, fast forward this video for about 30 seconds because I don't want to spoil it for you, even though it's not really kind of giving away the plot. But basically, it's based on the true story of Billy Beane and the Oakland A's baseball team. They couldn't compete financially with the richest team, so they had to find another way of identifying players who could help them win. And that's where the disagreement starts. You've got one side of very intelligent people. They've got a lot of experience when it comes to baseball scouting. Some of them who have spent decades watching players. These people aren't idiots. They've developed years of pattern recognition. So they can watch somebody throw a ball, look at how they move, how they're built, their temperament, their techniques, and notice things most of us wouldn't even see. But Billy Beane and his team started looking at those same players through data. And suddenly some of the players that the traditional scouts didn't see any value in looked incredibly valuable when you measured different things. And that's the bit I find really interesting because they're looking at the exact same players. It's not necessarily that one side has the facts and the other side doesn't. They have exactly the same information. They're just disagreeing about what facts matter. And I think that's a much better way of understanding a lot of the arguments we're having right now when it comes to AI. Because I've spent about 15 years helping organizations make sense of digital change and transformation. And one of the things I've noticed is that when something genuinely disruptive arrives, people don't really divide into the clever people who understand it over here and the stupid people who don't get it over there. You get intelligent, experienced, well-informed people looking at the same change and reading it completely different. This is actually one of the 7 stages on my StoryLens method, which is the framework I've developed around one of the oldest story structures there is. A stranger comes to town. You have an established world, something new enters it and changes things. And at some point, people start forming different views about what that change actually means. I call that stage the divide stage. And the important thing about the divide stage is that I'm not particularly interested in putting people in different camps and deciding which camp is right and which camp is wrong. I'm more interested in understanding the different readings because two people can look at exactly the same information and genuinely see something completely different. And this is where I think intelligence can actually make things harder because intelligent people are usually pretty good at building arguments. And I'm going to put myself in that, we can find evidence, explain reasoning, and find other intelligent people who agree with us. And that becomes even harder to challenge when our identity, our reputation, and sometimes income is tied to being right. So sometimes intelligence doesn't make us better at changing our minds. It just makes us better at defending our position we're already taking. Just look at politics, especially over the last 10 years. You've got people that will support their political parties like it's a football team. It doesn't matter what they say, we're supporting them. And I'm sure everyone's got examples of this. It might not be politics, but I'm sure there's examples where this has happened to you. For me, I remember back in 2006, I was working at the BBC when I was approached about potentially joining MySpace. Now, this is just to give you an idea of time. You've got to forget everything you know about what happened afterwards, because this wasn't MySpace at its peak or the fall. This was on its way up. Facebook was still only available to university students. The word social media wasn't even an actual phrase then. And leaving something like the BBC to go to work for an internet company did not look like the obvious career move it might sound like today. I remember telling my friends and just acquaintances I was thinking about like going and leaving the BBC. And the reaction for a lot of people was basically, why would you leave the BBC to go work for a website? And the thing is, that wasn't a stupid question either. From their perspective, they were looking at a prestigious organization that had been around for decades versus a relatively new website. And this was only a few years after the whole internet crash, where companies like lastminute.com and breathe.com and a lot of people put a lot of money and lost everything. I wasn't looking at it that way. I was seeing something different. I thought there was something happening with this internet thing and this potential social media thing and the way people were connecting online. And I wanted to be a part of it. So I took the job. Now, 20 years later, I can tell that story and make myself out to be some kind of digital Nostradamus. But let's be honest, that's bollocks, really. I just made a judgment based on what I could see at the time. And the fact that they paid me 10 grand more helped. So that definitely helped. But there's been plenty of other things over the last 20 years where I've made a judgment and got it completely wrong. And that's one of the problems with hindsight. Once we know what happened, we start pretending the decision was obvious, when at the time, it definitely wasn't. And I think it's worth remembering when you're trying to work out what you believe about AI today, because everybody wants to know who's right. Is AI going to take millions of jobs or create millions of jobs? Is it going to make us more productive or make us a lot lazier? Is it going to be brilliant for the creative industry or absolutely destroy it? Is the environmental impact going to become a serious problem, or will improvements in the technology solve some of that? I don't know all of those answers, and neither does the person confidently telling you that they definitely do. So I don't think your job is to find somebody who can predict the future for you. Your job is to get better at judging the different readings you're being given. Make a decision based on what you know now and remain prepared to change that decision when evidence changes. And this is why divide plays such an important role in the story you're already in. When two intelligent people you respect are looking at the same change and telling you completely different things, don't immediately ask who's right. Instead, start with something like, what is person A seeing? Then, what's person B seeing? And understand they both could be right. But my favorite question in the whole like divide stage of the story is what are they seeing that I'm not seeing? Because you're no longer trying to choose a team. You're trying to understand how two different readings of the same situation were created. Then ask what each person has to gain or lose from the position they're taking. That doesn't mean accusing everyone of having some secret agenda, but incentives affect all of us. So it's worth understanding, hence politics. After that, bring it back to your own situation. What parts of either argument actually apply to you, your work, your circumstances, your goals? Somebody can give you a fantastic advice that's completely correct for them, but completely useless for you. And finally, what would change my mind? That's so important. What would change my or your mind? That might actually be the most important question of all, because if the truthful answer is nothing, you're probably not making a judgment anymore. You're just defending your position. You know, this is where I'm standing. Nothing you can say will convince me otherwise. And here's where AI itself becomes genuinely useful. You can take the two arguments you're struggling with, give them to whichever large language model you choose, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever it may be. Then ask it to help you analyze them using those 5 questions I just gave you. Don't ask it, though, who's right. Ask it to show you what each person is seeing, where they're reading things different, what each has to gain or lose, which parts are relevant to your circumstances, and what evidence should reasonably cause you to change your mind if it needs to be changed. You could even finish the actual prompt with, challenge my current position as well. What might I be seeing incorrectly? Because the objective isn't to get AI to make the decision for you. It's to help you see the decision more clearly. And then you have to do something that no amount of research, experts, or AI can completely remove from the process. You have to make a judgment. Take what you've learnt, make the best decision you can based on the evidence and your circumstances, and then test it for long enough to learn something useful. How long? Well, that depends completely on what you're testing. But if something is important to you, I genuinely want to give it as much time as possible, or at least a decent amount of time. Depending on what it actually is and how important it is, 3 months is often the minimum. That whole 90 days thing. If not, Google it or put it on ChatGPT. I'm sure you hear stuff about the 90 days theory. Once I've gone through the time period, I can then look again and ask whether it actually worked, what I've learnt, and more importantly, whether I've seen anything that could change my mind. Because being a good judge of change doesn't mean getting every decision right. It just means understanding why you've made the decision you've made while remaining willing to change it when the evidence gives you good enough reason to. And also having the ego to do so and say that you're wrong or you've changed your mind if need be. And once you've made that judgment about AI and started testing it, another question appears. How do you know when AI has stopped being something you're consciously trying to use and has simply become part of the way you work? That's what I look at in this video using another stage of the story lens called the new norm.